Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, where, as always, you can find show notes and complete episodes at autoimmunerehab.com. And without further ado, let's welcome Kat, who is today's guest, to the podcast. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some of her autoimmune journey, some of the things that she's done to heal, that kind of thing. So, welcome, Kat. Why don't you start a little bit by talking with us a little bit
Thank
about
you.
where who are you? Share that with us first, I guess, would be a good place to start.
Who am I? Gosh, that's a long question, isn't it? I know.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so I am. I'm someone that's been on a lifelong journey, actually, to learn how to overcome suffering, all the suffering of disease and death and dilemmas and betrayals. And I was writing a book actually called "Never Let a Good Disaster Go to Waste," and I came to this country called Vanuatu to finish my book. And it turns out that this country is called Vanuatu, where I'm living right now. It's the most disaster prone country in the world, which I thought was funny. So I'm writing a book called Never Let a Good Disaster Go to Waste. And I ended up in the most disaster prone country in the world. And then of course, what happened? An epidemic happened and got stranded here for 3 years and no COVID. So it was very funny. But I'm someone that's cured myself of MS. I was diagnosed when I was 24 years old. And so a big part of my book and my journey is really telling people how to overcome the suffering of disease and betrayal.
Awesome. That's cool. So when you say that Vanuatu is the most disaster prone, is that because of things like hurricanes and just their location being an island, or what makes them disaster prone? I'm just curious because I'm sure most people listening out here don't really, like, we were talking a little bit before we started recording that Vanuatu was the site of one of the seasons of Survivor, but that's pretty much what most of us, more than likely the majority of the audience that's US and Canada primarily, that's what we think of. So we don't, we're not super familiar with what would make that place disaster prone.
Yeah. So Vanuatu is in the South Pacific. It's near Fiji, and Vanuatu is made up of 83 islands. And yes, so we are, since I've been here, I've had, gosh, maybe 500 earthquakes,
Whoa.
some a lot of small ones, a lot of big ones. Not a lot of damage, but we've had a massive cyclone. Cyclone Harold came through in 2020. We have tsunamis. I've been through a couple of tsunamis. We have cyclones, tsunamis, earthquakes. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to think
Wow.
what other natural. Oh, volcanoes, volcanoes. Yeah, we I live right across from a volcano that I can see, and that was sort of going off for a while. Yes, there's plenty of active volcanoes here too. So between all those things, the WHO classified Vanuatu as the most disaster-prone country in the world.
Wow. Well,
That's
there
a
probably
fun
aren't
place to
tons of
live.
people that live there either, I would imagine. So that makes it,
The
an interesting dynamic
population's
too.
230,000. There's
Oh,
not a
wow.
lot of people. So it's
Yeah.
230,000 between the whole 83 islands. So yeah, there's not a lot of people.
That's cool, but yeah, that is pretty ironic that you came there to write that book. So, what tell us a little bit about your journey. What led you to start writing the book? What about that?
Sure. So if I'm going to be honest with you, it started 10 years ago on my 40th birthday. I was actually in the hospital and I was part of a trial for CCSVI, which was ballooning the veins in my neck. So it was a 2-year trial where they'd either do the operation or not. But either way, they'd knock me out. So anyway, I was lying there on my 40th birthday. That's the place you want to be on your birthday, is lying in the hospital.
Yeah.
And my daughter rang me. And my daughter said, "Happy birthday, Mummy." And I said, "Thank you, Ellie." And she said, "Oh, guess what, Mummy? Tanya slept in your bed last night." I said, "Really?" So anyway, I got home from the hospital and looked at the text messages, and there it was. Yes, there was definitely an affair happening, and I was completely and utterly devastated. So for 12 hours, I thought, "Oh my God, what am I going to do the rest of my life? Like, I can't believe this has happened to me." And, 3 kids and 15 years of marriage. And then I got over it in 12 hours. And part of the way I got over it was the idea that, well, I've had MS since I was 24 years old. Like, husband leaving me, it wasn't anything worse than 10 years of not being able to walk. So I had all these epiphanies over these 12 hours. And that's when I decided to write a book actually called How to Get Over Betrayal in 12 Hours. But upon writing that book, it's now changed into Never Let a Good Disaster Go to Waste. So it is my journey about MS and how I got over my disease and dealing with all the disability and the unknown and navigating the medical system and the alternative medical way, the alternative ways of conquering all the challenges of MS, and then all the drugs I took, and then all the things I had to do because of all the drugs I took. So yeah, so I've come up with these 12 principles of basically how to never let a good disaster go to waste.
That's awesome. That sounds like that's going to be an amazing book. Are you self-publishing that, or do you have an actual publisher that you're working with? What's that process look like?
Look, yeah, it's been 10 years in the making, and I've decided to self-publish. It will be a bestseller, and it will be a movie, and I will be on Oprah. So you heard it here first. Yeah, look, I have high hopes. But look, I've got a lot of people pre-read the book, and it really has something for everyone. I've had a very long journey of disasters. So basically, no matter what disaster you have, I can teach you how to become a master of your disaster.
That's awesome. I love that. That rhymes too. Teach you how to be a master of your disaster. That's some
Yeah,
golden nuggets there, right there for sure. So you said that you
yeah.
started basically on the journey when you got MS at 24. That was kind of sounds like that was the first catalyst, if you will, to start, the whole journey of healing and living through some of the disasters, that kind of thing. So when you first got your diagnosis, what did you do to begin with? Did you stick with traditional medicine in the beginning and then move to holistic, or do a mix of both? What did you do in the beginning?
Well, actually, I'll rewind a little bit. I was when I was 6 years old, I started getting really bad migraines. So I was really debilitated by migraines most of my young life. And my mother was the one that was like chiropractors, nutritionists, like, Taco El Paso, old El Paso food seasoning, like taco kit, immediate migraine. So very early on, I realized that food and diet really could relate to my physical body and what actually happened to me. So I learned early on that, and also my thoughts, whenever I get really excited about something, I'd get a migraine. If I got really upset, I'd get a migraine. So I learned very early on. So when I was diagnosed actually at 24 with MS, funnily enough, I practiced something I call ignorant bliss. And I'm like, well, because your first diagnosis with MS, they basically say it's your first time. So MS is multiple attacks, and I'd only just had one. So basically, if it happens again, it's multiple sclerosis. One time, it's just sort of a one-time demyelination. So I was like, never going to happen to me again. That's not me. But of course, it did, and it happened when when I was 27, my first son was born. He was 2 weeks old, and I couldn't really walk anymore. Crying in his bassinet, and I'm trying to walk there, and I can't lift my leg, and then I'm trying to hold this baby, and then limp, limp, limp. And anyway, so I called my neurologist, and he said, "Look, you do have MS. You must come to Melbourne. I lived 4 hours out of Melbourne at the time, and start treatment." So I did. I started 4 days of steroids, and then he said, "You have to stop breastfeeding and go on these drugs, these injections for the rest of your life." And I didn't really like that answer, so I took the steroids and got a little bit better, and then I went back to feeding. So I didn't really take the drugs at
Yeah,
first.
which is good. And then, so instead of taking that drugs, did you immediately go seek out some kind of holistic help, or immediately do some drastic diet changes? What did you do after that then?
Well, I think the first time I decided not to do much at all except for nutrition. I sort of thought, oh, I'll just eat well. And when I called the MS Society, the first thing they said was MS is a disease that strikes young people down the prime of their life. And I thought, yeah, I don't want to be going down that route. It was a lot of drugs. And I did eventually take some injections later down the road. I tried some, but I really did start looking at diet, nutrition, and other things I could do. But then I ended up having 3 kids in 3 years by accident somehow. I don't know how that happened. So every single time I had a child, I would get sicker and sicker. So by the time my daughter was born, my third child, I had 2 boys and then a girl. My first son was called Search, and the second was called Destroy, actually. And then thank God I had a little girl. But anyway, it was very challenging to keep up with them. because when she was born, I lost the vision in my eye. I couldn't use my left leg. My right leg didn't work great. My left arm didn't work. And I was trying to look after these little people who, yeah, it was a real challenge. And so that's when I really took a deep dive into, I did start taking the drugs, the injections, which were the interferons, which are now obsolete. They actually weren't a cure. They only actually reduced relapse rate by 30%. So, and they said, you're going to get to where you're going to get to anyway. So I'm like, right, I'm going to find another way. So that's when I really got into diet, like hardcore diet, spent at least 6-7 years on the diet. And then I started getting into stem cell, and I went overseas for stem cell.
It's interesting. And where did you end up doing your stem cells at? Just curious.
So that's a bit of an interesting story because it was 15 years ago. I was 35 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Israel where they took my stem cells, but they weren't allowed to put them back into me. So in Israel, they could take things out, but not put them in. So I had to go to either Greece or Turkey, and I ended up being sent to Greece. And for quite a horrific experience, actually, because they took out some spinal fluid, and then they re-injected these stem cells that they had grown. And the lady, the doctor that was doing it, kept stabbing me in the back to try to get the needle in my back, and ended up hitting something. And so I've lost my ability to really move much for over a month. But in saying that, it was a success. I got the movement back in my legs, because before I went there, I couldn't lift my left leg at all. Hadn't run in like 6 years, like could barely walk, was always having to swing my leg, have to lift my leg in and out of a car. Couldn't go up a set of stairs unless I was like clutching a railing. So
Okay.
yeah, but after the stem cell, my leg was much better. It wasn't great, but it was 100% to what it was.
That's interesting.
And the
Yeah,
pins and needles.
I know stem cells have come a
Mm-hmm.
long way in even just the last 15 years. It's become much more of, I've been looking into them and, reading up on them and stuff too, because I have knees that are pretty bad and had knee surgery, and my orthopedic actually is doing stem cells now as an alternative to knee replacements. And he's actually having really, really good success with it, to the point that most of the time he doesn't even have to do knee replacements anymore because he's able to get the stem cells to work instead.
Well, it was interesting because when I went for my stem cell, my neurologist said, well, it's not going to work, and it was well over $40,000. And, and then I went back to him, I went for my before check because I had to have MRIs, and I had to have this medical checkup before I went to the doctors in the clinic in Israel. And, he did my diet, all the pre checks, and I couldn't lift my leg, and I couldn't walk heel to toe, and I've got videos. And then when I got back, I was like, look at me, I'm running again, and I'm doing all these things. And he starts shaking his head like in wonder, and he goes, you're worse. What if you just stop being ridiculous and start taking drugs again? And I'm like, what is wrong? Like, I couldn't believe it. So anyway, I was really well, and I was really well for 5 years. And in that 5 years, he actually called me. He goes, what was that thing you did again? Because people knew who I was. I was on the 7:30 report. I had been in the newspaper a bit from my journey that I'd done. And yeah, so I think, they're starting to wake up to maybe there was something in it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot more doctor stem cells are definitely becoming more of a thing. I know my orthopedic has gone to Mexico to study stem cells a lot, and it said that Mexico is really becoming a leading
advance,
place. They're about 30 years ahead of the US when it comes to stem cells, and a lot of like the, just the other, as it relates to orthopedics specifically. But I'm sure, when it comes to MS and other things like that, they are. But yeah, I mean, he says stem cells are the way of the future for everything pretty much. And,
but isn't that scary? It's like, these drug companies. So an MS patient's worth about $5 million to the pharmaceutical industry.
Ooh,
because you usually get diagnosed at a young age, 24, 25, or even younger. And then you're on meds for the rest of your life. You are a huge ticket item to the pharmaceutical industry. So if you cure that person with not a drug, but actually their own body, what happens then?
Yeah, exactly.
First of all, the doctor hasn't got a patient when he has a lifelong patient and an MS person. And the drug companies, what happens then? There's no revenue. You don't need them anymore.
They're not motivated to cure you. Why would they be? Yeah, I actually,
Nope,
there's actually
not in
another
my
interview
opinion.
that I did a few months ago on this same podcast that some of you that are listening to this probably maybe listen to the other one. If you haven't listened to the other one, it's worth listening to too, with a lady who got MS at 19 and who actually went to acupuncture school and became an acupuncturist and completely went into remission with MS with with acupuncture. So, there definitely are ways out there to treat it, and it's not all about the drugs.
Actually, acupuncture, during one of a really bad attack I was having, when it was the first time, only time I was in a lot of pain, I went to acupuncture and it helped. And after my stem cell, when they hit something in my back, it was acupuncture that eventually really just got me back able to move again. I love
That's awesome.
acupuncture.
Yeah. So
I
fast
think
forward
it's
a
practitioner specific, but
Yeah. So
sorry.
fast forward a little bit today, you pretty much don't have the MS symptoms anymore. I don't know if they necessarily totally officially call you cured, but you're at least in remission and thriving and seems to be anyway. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, so now I'm 50 years old and I'm doing, and actually every single day I'm doing things. I'm thinking, I can do that now. Like, it's just because I teach yoga and fitness, and the reason I went to yoga because I used to be a runner and teach like step aerobics and high impact stuff, and I wasn't able to do it, so I went more into yoga. But now I'm back doing everything. I'm back running again. I just ran 5Ks for my 50th, which was like something I
Ooh,
never
yeah.
ever thought I could do. And I just, for my 50th, I'm like, I'm going to run again. I'm like, but you can't run. I'm like, yes, I can. So, yeah, and I'm balancing, and look, the stem cells helped. The stem cells did buy me 5 years. But after 5 years, I did have another attack. I was going to do another stem
Mhm.
cell, but the price had gone up
Oh gosh, yeah.
substantially. And I was suggested to do another drug, which is called Limtrada, which is only available after you fail every other drug because the drug actually stops MS, which is what actually gave me Hashimoto's and ITP and a few other diseases. But in comparison to where I was at, I would take them any day of the week.
For sure. Absolutely. So yeah, it definitely sounds like you've been on quite a journey. I'm sure your book's going to be really amazing. So do you have like websites and contact information people can stay in touch and get updates for when the book's available? So they can go check it out.
Absolutely, yeah. My website's katfinnerty.com, but it's still kind of a work in progress, like at this moment. But on Facebook, Kat Finnerty, and on Instagram, Kat Finnerty, you can find me there.
Awesome.
So I run
Okay.
retreats around the world, and yeah, anyone that needs help getting over betrayal or overcoming if they want to become a master of disaster, just look me up and I'll hook you up.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we'll make sure that we link to all those in the show notes so you can stay in touch. And is your book coming soon, do you think?
Yeah, look, it's just in the production series process right now, where it's just in formatting and book cover. So I am inviting people if they would like to be part of my book launch, which basically means they're just going to get a 99-cent version, a cheaper copy to read, and if they like it, they just review it, and that's it. And tell their
Awesome.
friends. So if
Cool. I
anyone wants to
probably will
join
have
my
to
book
take you
launch
up on
team,
that for sure. And we'll have
absolutely,
the information
absolutely.
below for anybody else that's listening to this that wants to take you up on it. Anything else you want to share with anybody that's listening to
So
this?
my Yeah, absolutely. So, my mission, my purpose in life is to help all beings overcome suffering and create masters of disaster. And one thing I didn't add is I'm in Vanuatu and there's a massive problem with malnutrition. So, everyone that buys an egg, buys a book, basically hatches an egg. So, I'm actually doing a project to bring chickens that lay eggs, teach people how to do that. Um, and so, yeah, so anyone that wants to come to Vanuatu and help me in my chicken project, I invite you to my house and you can come on over and build some chicken pens with me.
Well, that sounds like quite the adventure. Don't know if I'm quite up for that just yet, but I'll keep it in mind for, maybe future bucket
Anyone's
list
welcome.
stuff. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Great. Well, thanks so much for
Come
being with
survive.
us. And
It was an
yeah, so
absolute pleasure.
yeah, for sure, absolutely. So everybody who's listening to this, make sure you check out our website so you can, if you're interested in helping her promote her book, let her know about that too. Stay in touch. It sounds amazing.